You got some good dance moves over there. You got some nice dance moves. Everyone, welcome into the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe, just maybe, you got a moment to sit back and relax and listen to your favorite podcast, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing. Thanks for being here and thanks for tuning in. Today's guest is, of course, well, someone who has amazing dance moves and someone you won't forget. Scott, an author, speaker, and expert in nonviolent communication. He's the author of How to Evolve During Whether Humanity Joins You or Not. And he has a knack for using humor, storytelling, and even Seussian rhyme to help people navigate division, stress, and tough conversations with grace. Pun intended. His last name's Gray, so that's where the pun is. Scott has shared the stage with Robin Williams, Dana Carvey, Deepak Chopra, Jack Canfield, and even presidential candidate. His mission? To help people stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other as humans. So make sure you grab your juice box, grab a snack, and let's jump into the conversation. Scott, welcome to the show.
Jay.
Of course, happy to have you. So you built a career on helping people navigate conflict and division, but what led you down this path? Was there like any
Conflict and
particular
division.
moment?
No, just a history of not getting along with my mom, my dad, my sisters, and wanted to explore solutions so that I don't carry that into my relationships as an adult.
So as you started doing this work, when was it that you realized this is the work that you were meant to be doing?
2 nights ago. I had a real awakening. So yeah, there's been moments, but really it's just been a gradual process without a lot of drama and epiphanies. But when I mentioned Saturday night, I did a 2-hour show, comedy, poetry, and a bit of storytelling around the experience of, can we rise above our petty differences and restore a sense of humanity to the conversation, especially when we disagree with each other. And so I'm going to take that to college campuses and all over.
Yeah, our those petty differences can make or break a lot of relationships, and they're just petty. They're just very small, right? They're very minute, but we oftentimes take them as life-changing or groundbreaking or something that like a means to break a bridge that will never be repaired. But they're so small. They're so small sometimes. Most of the time, they're so small. And it's hard for some people to see that. It's hard for some people to see that. But a lot of people feel, right now, especially more than ever, we're just divided, just as people, not just in politics, but also in family, friend group, and even churches. What has fueled all this division to this point?
Well, my theory is the world is changing at lightning speed. And it's like some people are driving in the fast lane, let's call them progressives. And for people driving in the slow lane, the progressives are dizzying. They're just so threatening. They're driving too fast. It's like, slow down, man. I'm clutching the steering wheel, just trying to make my way. And you're just like, so annoying. And so fear is behind all this. And so the people in the slow lane have turned to somebody who says, hey, I'll slow this down. You get in the back seat, let down the window, take in the view. I'm going to drive the car. I'll be your chauffeur. And I'll slow it down. And I'll even put the car in reverse and return to good old days. Happy day. Sunday, Monday, happy days. Tuesday, Wednesday, happy days. Thursday, Friday, happy days. The weekend comes, having fun, driving my car to you. These days are all happy and free, those happy days. That's what Donald is selling. People are hungry to reduce their fear. And what did people do when they are afraid they're going to lose their stuff? Many people buy a guard dog. They buy a Doberman or a pit bull, and they train them to be vicious so that they can protect that person and their family from the immigrants, the Canadians, the Europeans, the Mexicans. and they feel safer with that guard dog as president. And everyone's afraid. The more fear in the nervous system, the more rigidly we hold on to our opinions, and the more we feel like my way is the right way, my way or the highway. There is no other sane point of view out there but mine and my tribe. We're getting tribal. We're getting tribal. And that is fear.
That makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of fear that fuels division, and it's a really powerful driver, politically and socially. And people are always wanting to fear monger, right? There's some
Yeah,
very successful people on the internet that are just straight fear mongers. There's a lot of
absolutely.
politicians who are just straight fear mongers and are very successful. And fear is how you keep people, like you're saying, keep people thinking like, oh well, I'm gonna do this because I'm afraid, or I'm not gonna do this because I'm afraid, right? It's every day, every choice we make. It's like, oh, I'm not gonna drink that energy drink because it's gonna make me feel this way, so I'm afraid of how it's gonna make me feel, or I'm not gonna eat that thing because I'm afraid it's gonna make me fat, or I'm not afraid it's gonna make me fat, so I'm just gonna eat it anyway, kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
it comes down to everything. There's a little bit of fear in everything we do,
Oh yeah.
good and
Oh
bad.
yeah.
There's good and bad fear.
Well, I have a part of myself called the spiritual Dr. Seuss, who spouts wisdom in rhyme. And he says, fear was a good thing when lions were chasing you, gathering speed with intentions of tasting you. But nowadays, most of the lions we find are fictional cats roaming round in our minds. And we stop feeding the cats in our head. They just go away because they're not getting fed.
Yeah,
And that's a
yeah,
psychological process. It's an emotional journey.
yeah,
And yes, I agree with you. The media knows how to get our attention and profits by scaring the shit out of us. If it bleeds, it leads. And I'm not blaming the media because it's our state of consciousness that wants that stuff. And when individual needs change, the media will change. When I was in Europe, years and years ago, McDonald's had recycling, Burger King had healthy options. Why? Because they could make a profit. Why? Because people demanded that. When people demand, President Eisenhower said this, a conservative Republican in the 50s, when people want peace enough, governments of the world are going to have to stand aside and allow them to have it.
yeah. I think a lot of people just want that peace, though, right? Like a lot of people just want some kind of peace in their life, in some way, shape, or form, whether that's in their relationship, their families, their home, their work,
Absolutely.
when they're driving their car. Like everyone just wants peace. They
I
just want peace.
believe that in all my heart that when we're looking for material goods or status or power, these are substitutes for the elixir of just being peaceful.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we just want some form of peace. Like I don't think anyone, except for very few select politicians, want continued war, right? They want to keep fueling the MCI or the MIC, the military industrial complex. Outside of those, let's say 100 to 200 people probably, and maybe, I don't know, a few thousand in between here and there across the world. I mean, there's 8 billion people, right? So there's going to be more than a few thousand that, are like, ooh, war, yeah, war, war, war. I feel like the most part, everybody else is just like, yeah, let's not kill each other. Let's not bomb each other. Let's not, you know, starve each other to the point where they're desperate, or let's not do these things, like, right? Like, we don't. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to just have people dying. Let's just have peace. Let's just,
Yeah.
instead of trying to fight and take each other's resources, let's just negotiate. Let's all come to the table. Let's just negotiate. Let's just make a deal that benefits both sides.
The art of the deal
Art of the deal.
or the
Which,
heart of the deal?
I mean, it's both, right? It's both. There has to be an art to it, but there also is a heart to it at the same time. Like, okay, how can we make a deal here that's gonna benefit both of us? How can we make a deal that we're both gonna feel good about leaving?
Mm.
That's gonna benefit your people, my people, and everyone in between. It remain peaceful.
Someone at my event on Saturday night, it was Q&A, and they asked, how do you get egocentric people who only care about themselves, their family, and their country and their political party to start caring about other people outside of their circle, maybe even the whole planet and all of the suffering, not just Israel, not just Palestine, not just poor people or rich people, but just open their hearts to the suffering and have compassion across the board with no exceptions. And I said, you don't. You can't. You can't change another person's evolution. One of the amazing and I think beautiful things about this planet is that we're all in different stages of development and we all have free will. So everybody's on their own personal journeys, and the experiment is how do we get along with all these differences? And sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I read the New York Times in January. They come out with an article about all the good things that happened that year and all of the and there's so many good things that are happening that are not being reported, including every year there's less and less war if you look at the whole planet. And that's amazing.
yeah. No, and there's always good things going on, right? But there's also we have such a fast, fast news cycle. It's always moving so fast. It's hard to keep up, right? It's hard to keep up. Like there's dozens and dozens and dozens of article, new thing, old thing gone, old thing gone. That old thing just happened 35 seconds ago, it feels like, you know? And so it moves so fast. But then, going back to that question you asked at your Q&A, personally, I mean, maybe it's just where I'm at on my evolution and things like that, however you want to see it. But for me, like, I see nothing wrong with, yes, there should be compassion at the big picture, right? But how can you have compassion for the large scale of stuff when there's not even compassion here in your own country, right? You have to take care of course, yourself and your family first. If you don't have enough compassion to go outside of that, why would you try to give more compassion than you actually have outside of that? That's where
Well,
all you
that's
don't. And then
you
you go
can't.
to your community, and then you go to your state, and then you go to your country. Like these things have to be scalable, right? And you have to have enough within yourself to give. But if all you have to give and all you can muster and all that, you where you put all the compassion you have, I mean that's a choice. You can
Yeah.
choose to have all this compassion for everyone, but what is that gonna do? You know?
Mm,
When the most impact you're gonna have, at least in my thought here, is like, well, the most yes, I can be compassionate to all these people everywhere, right? But I will likely never go to Israel. I'll never go to Gaza.
mm,
I'll never go to Ukraine. I'll never go to Saudi Arabia. I'll never go to all these places, right?
mhm,
So I'll never meet these people. I'll never see their
mm.
I'll never be affected by them, right? The struggle that I'll be most affected with, where I need to have the most compassion, is obviously within my home, with my family, because that's where I have the biggest impact, is in my kid, and then my wife, and my family structure, and then into my community. That's where I'm gonna have the most impact, and then in my state. A lot of people think all this stuff happening federally is gonna make or break my entire life. When was the last time that you knew what bills were being passed at in your state level? How your property taxes are gonna be raised, how this tax is gonna affect you, how this levy was gonna impact you, or how they're trying to pass this bill or that bill or this bill or that bill. Like here in Washington State, and this is something I'm super incredibly passionate about. So a few weeks ago, I started a new podcast. It's called the Evergreen Report, and it's primarily talking about stuff going on here in Washington State, just within the state. And so I started with a looking at all these bills going through the House and the Senate here in the state. And I start looking and I start looking, I start digging. I'm like, holy crap, like they want to tax so here in Washington State, this is one of the crazier ones, right? Where they want to tax every single person who drives their car So they want to put a GPS tracker on all your cars, which sounds unconstitutional as it is, to track you everywhere you go. I'm pretty sure that it hinges on the 14th Amendment. But I could be mistaken there. But anyways, so they want to track how many miles you drive, right? And then tax you per mile. And then at the end of the year, let's say you drive 12,000 miles, you're going to pay like $400 or $500 or something, right? I don't remember the exact amount. But then from there, they want to tax you 10% on top of that. On top of that. So there's a tax on a tax to make you pay.
It sounds
On
so
top of
taxing, Jay. It's so taxing. I'd rather be relaxing than being taxing.
exactly.
Yesterday morning, I stumbled upon a video. An economy teacher was teaching his students about the history of the economy. And what struck me was Dwight Eisenhower. Boy, I'm quoting him twice. In the 1950s, conservative Republican president, had the most prosperous America that we ever had. And the rich were taxed 94%. And they complained, and he lowered it to 92%. That's where taxes belong. The people who have so much money, they just don't know what to do with it all, and they can't spend it all. Their contribution is what's most needed. And Reaganomics and this whole consciousness of trickle down was crazy, and it had no reality to it. It was the biggest scam we've ever been sold, and look what's happened. The other thing the economy that struck me was that from 1968 to 1973, there was so many marches on Washington, so much social justice. And at that time, college tuition was the equivalent of today's $300 per year. And how many of us young people would love to go back to that, right? $300 a year.
Okay.
You know, Republican thought leaders had this think tank where they said, we can't let this happen again. We can't let people have so much free time that they can go to Washington, that they can devote a chunk of their lives to protesting. So they started raising college tuition, and they trickled down everything so that we have to have 2 jobs and constantly be focused on money and not have a voice in our democracy anymore because we're too stressed out. How can we prevent this from happening again? Everybody marching, everybody getting their voice into basically people stopped the Vietnam War because they had enough free time to care and to do something. So they raised college tuition. It used to be today's equivalent of $300. Now, of course, it's many, many thousands of dollars, so that kids would not be able, they would have to join the workforce just to start to pay off their college tuition. And the trickle-down economy, part of the reason that they came up with that brilliant idea is so that people would have to work 2 jobs just to make ends meet and won't even be able to think, let alone do something about the injustices in our system.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before, but then that was during Nixon's presidency. So that was already, I think we went from Lyndon B. Johnson to Nixon right around then, if I believe. If I'm getting history right here. As long as Wikipedia is right here, then that's what it because Johnson was the president in 1960 before the 68 race. It looks like there's 3 nominees: Nixon, Hubert Humphrey, and George Wallace, which was actually a pretty formidable race overall. I mean, Wallace still got about 10 million votes, which is great. But yeah, I hadn't heard that before. I don't know much about the Vietnam War. I know it was a war that we probably had no business getting into. Like most wars, we go into those wars for some kind of resource. We want something from them. We want to take something, right? And a lot of presidents are guilty of that.
Oh, it's not just presidents.
Yeah, a lot of presidents, politicians in general, leaders in these different fields, the military-industrial complex. But yeah, no, this time period, it makes a lot of sense, right? The 64 to 68, post World War II, or not World War II. Oh my gosh, Vietnam War. I'm sorry. Because Lyndon B. Johnson created the nanny state,
Not sure
LBJ,
what that is.
the nanny state, the welfare state,
Uh,
or that was a big one, which started to drive fathers out of home. And so there was a lot of just things that had happened from this time, from post World War II up until this time. A lot of factories, right? A lot of factories were big. Industrial work was big. Factory work, to where men were going to work for long hours of the day, right? And then women were going to work for long hours of the day. So where were the kids? The kids were going to school. They were going to schools for long hours of the day. And schools were originally set up to help create factory workers with the bell system and everything. That was the point of school when they first started. And then as Lyndon B. Johnson took over, then you create the nanny state. And then people started relying more on the government and then less of themselves. And so there's more and more reliance on the government to fill these roles in the home that men should have been filling. But men are working these longer hours. Like, oh, we don't need men. Women can do all these things. And I'm not saying women are incapable, but that's kind of where the slope started to go downhill and snowball, where the snowball started, at least in my opinion. But it was right around this time, 68, Vietnam War, 70s is when we really started to go down. And it's just interesting because now we see the effects of that, right? We see, a generation or two later, just all the effects of this. Here in I use Washington State as an example because I'm very familiar with it, because I can't speak for any other state. I don't live there. I grew up in California. I grew up in, went to college in Idaho and lived some time in Hawaii. But Washington, I'm most familiar with. Spent most of my life here. And since 2019, we've had a 110% increase in how much we spend per student. 110% increase. So, Scott, naturally, with that much money being spent per student, do you think our test scores have gone up and our math literacy has gone up since 2019?
I don't think that's a question because you already proved your point.
And exactly. So I was just what like common sense would have you think like, oh yeah, if you spend that much money, like you're investing all that money, like these students should be doing great, right? Like
Again,
you want to
I
naturally
have
think that.
nothing to say. You're making your points all by yourself.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, it's like naturally, like you want to think, oh, I'm spending all this money, I'm going to get a good return on my investment. Our test scores have fallen, where our eighth graders don't have above a fifth grade reading level. Our eighth graders don't have above a fourth grade level in math. Since
How does this
2019 has stopped.
affect you? I'm wanting to bring it more closer to home. How does this affect you as a dad? Let's bring it into ourselves and get more personal. That's my specialty, is helping people with their inner state and inner journey, the state of self rather than what's out there that really can't be controlled,
Most
that really
definitely.
can't. Yeah, so let's bring it home. Your show is for dads, and refresh my memory.
It's
Who is our audience?
for
It's
everybody.
for everyone. Okay.
Yeah. So that was just I don't know how we went down that rabbit hole, but yeah. But the point of that to how it that impact that it has on, like the average person, like we pay a ridiculous amount of taxes here in Washington State. And I
Yes.
think there needs to be major tax reform at the federal level to then impact the state level, and every state has to work on reforming. But I think nearly every state, if I'm not mistaken, has some kind of deficit that they're in. I don't know
My
of any that don't.
I'm wanting to switch to being the podcast host and
Okay.
challenge you with a question. How does all this affect you emotionally? You are talking about stuff you can't control, and we haven't really talked about the stuff that we can control ourselves, our emotions, how we parent, how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves. So
I mean,
that's
it
where
all affects the day to day. Affects the day to day. Affects how much I'm paying. Affects how much my property taxes are. Affects how much all the things I pay for are. There's definitely an impact on all those
of
things.
course, of course. There's I'm a 12 stepper, and the prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I wrote a song I think would be cool to play right now. It's called the
Good.
Asshole Song, and it's the Serenity Prayer on steroid.
Okay.
I wrote this when somebody cut me off on the freeway, and I gave him the finger and I said, "Asshole!" And then I looked at the three fingers pointing back at myself, and I said, "Oh my God, I got to write a song about this." God grant me the serenity to accept the assholes you send to me. Like Captain Picard, I ask of you, God, to make it so that I can let need to be right. The thrill of the fight. If I had rabies, I might offer a bite. God, hear my call, send a grain of your salt, so I can take myself with some light. God, grant me the serenity to accept the asshole inside of me. For hard as I try to be a non-judging guy, sometimes I'm just looking through my anal eye. God, I'm down and I'm starting to see. Calling others asshole is a self-diagnosis. But I'd rather set myself and everyone free by loving all God's asshole unconditionally. Where you drive, you holy child. Yeah.
Very much like it. That's very telling, right? We often don't point that finger back at ourselves. A lot of the
Indeed.
time, we don't, but we need to, right?
I would love for you and I to do that right now, to actually practice being with ourselves and talking about ourselves, maybe even eliminating the word we from the conversation. That's my challenge because there's no we out there. It's just us, you and I.
Okay, try that. Let's shift gears then a little bit here. Let's talk about finding inner peace in this polarized world.
That would be my favorite thing to talk about.
So a lot of so people can feel burnout, anxious, or just plain exhausted by everything all the time. The stress, the
Yes,
negativity, the fighting.
yes.
How can we manage that? How can someone manage that stress, that burnout, that negativity?
All right. And again, I'm going to take it to I because I don't have any idea how we can do anything. But this is how I do it. First presidency of Donald Trump, I was glued to the media and I was just charged up with outrage and fear behind the outrage
Why? Why did you have outrage and fear?
because I was scared for my daughter. I was scared for my world. I was scared for my country. I was scared of losing what I consider a wonderful idea, democracy. But climate change and just the way that he and his cronies were not caring, not coming from a position of care. I don't want to get political again. This is about me. So
No, that's fine. That's why I
the
was asking you.
yeah,
I was curious
the
about why you were feeling that way.
that right, of course, thank you. The difference now is that I don't watch the news. I take a quick peek at the New York Times, I say a prayer, and I go about the business of being the change I want to see in the world. That's a Gandhi quote. And when I get angry, I just ask myself, do I want to be another contestant in the global outrage Olympics that is going on, or do I want to be part of the solution? And I think that it starts with prioritizing inner peace because I can't do anything for people if I'm really upset all the time or anxious or stressed out. This time around, my life is about protecting and cultivating personal peace.
I personally felt that same way more so during COVID, during the pandemic, and then when Biden took back office in 2020.
Yeah,
I felt more that
again,
way because it
it's
was a
all
crazy world,
outside
right?
you. It's all outside. You're putting your power in the hands of outer circumstances, and that's
Right. And
it's
that
going
was
to
the same
just
thing that happened in 2016 for you, right? There was a lot of power that was put
totally
in outside circumstances. And now we fast forward to today, we're 2025, and we've been through it before.
indeed. History
I've lived
repeats
through,
itself.
yeah, I lived through a Trump presidency. You lived through a Trump presidency. Both lived through the Biden presidency. We both lived through Obama. I think you've maybe lived through a few more presidencies than I have,
Maybe a few.
but it can be exhausting, right? I often feel like yesterday I was doing a bunch of research for my show, The Evergreen Report. I was doing a bunch of research, like because I needed to prep for this week for episodes I was going to make, and I was just going through all these bills, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is exhausting. How do these politicians do it? But for me, I have for me to deal with all this stuff, I just have to either I talk about it, right? Because I personally feel like not enough people in my community are aware, and so if I can help spread awareness, then I feel better about that, right? If I can use my voice and my platform to help someone else, then I feel much better, right? To educate someone, I feel much better about that.
Yeah, somebody asked me at the show Saturday night, what do I do with anger and all this hatred that I feel about what's going on in the world? And I said, it's not a problem. You just have to learn to channel that energy towards something positive. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, I think all of these change agents were the most effective because they took their outrage and channeled it to something outrageous. All that passion and commitment and conviction that was available started with rage. It started with pain. And then some people sit in that and are defined by it. And other people say, what can I do? What small thing can I do today that not just makes the world a better place, but makes me feel better? It's like you found something that makes you feel better and it's contributing to society. And that's what we all have to do, I think.
Yeah. Well, I also think that a lot of people misunderstand anger. Like I'm a mental health clinician. That's my day job, right?
Okay.
And so I work with a lot of people, helping them understand anger, helping a lot of kids work through their anger.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that anger is a secondary emotion.
Yes.
It's not the first emotion that comes knocking on the door. It's after the first emotion enters, then it turns into anger, right? But there's something underneath that anger. There's something that came before that anger. Maybe it's sadness, maybe it's disappointment, maybe it's fear, right? Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's who knows what other emotion it could. It could be a very array of emotions that can turn into anger. You could even be happy and then be angry. Like your happiness can turn into anger because you're like, I'm so damn happy all the time. Just can never feel anything else, kind of thing. It's possible. It's very possible. It is possible.
May we all have that problem.
Right? 100%. But people have to understand, like, your anger is a secondary emotion. I'm not here to give you clinical advice or anything like that. But you have to understand the basic premise of what anger is. And it's a secondary emotion. And you have to figure out, okay, why do you feel angry? A lot of people I work with, they don't ask why enough. We don't ask why. Why do I feel this way? Why am I so charged up about that? Why am I feeling so offended by this or whatever it might be, right? Why? Why? Just like I asked you why when you were talking about 2016, right? I asked you why you felt like that, and you told me why, and I was okay. Thanks for helping me understand that kind of thing.
Fear's behind, in my opinion, every negative emotion. One of the ways I teach that is I say, well, the spiritual Dr. Seuss says, fear likes to stay hidden from view and play hide and seek in its host, which is you. I'm not afraid, I'm just angry, it shouts. I've been mistreated and need to speak out. I'm not afraid, I'm upset and I'm caring. There's so many disguises that fear enjoys wearing. He's proud of his wardrobe because he designed it. Though he wouldn't admit it, fear's quite clothes-minded.
Yeah, it is. And I honestly I love how you use humor and storytelling and rhyme as a way to, help people break free from fear and outrage. Why do you think it works so well? Why do you think humor works when logic or argument fail?
Because it's non-defensive, it's non-offensive. It slips in through the back door. Everyone wants to be right. So if you come at people with, no, I'm right, here, let me explain to you, let me try to change your point of view, it fails every time. And my heroes have been Mark Twain and just a number of people who use humor and storytelling to, it doesn't seem like they're even interested in changing anybody else. They're just enjoying sharing folk wisdom. And yet in that environment, people feel safe to look at themselves and to question their beliefs. So it's a paradox that I love, that you can be most effective at helping people look into their minds and their hearts by not having an investment in what they're thinking or if they change or not.
Yeah. And humor is a great way to get you thinking, right? Because you can still
Man,
you can use humor in every variation of the way, right? You can use humor to, like you're saying here, it gets people in and on board whether they want to or not.
yeah.
It breaks
I
down their walls.
I'm just so excited to share more of it. So when I talk about why Donald Trump has been so popular, as I said, I talk about how Big Daddy is going to take the wheel and we can finally relax and go back to the good old days. But there's another factor, and that is he is like Mr. Right. For women who have experienced, oh, I've met the man of my dreams. He's so perfect. He's my knight in shining armor. Just like that. And just like the knight in shining armor, after the 10th date or the second year of marriage, a woman might realize that this man is stuck in his armor. He's more committed to being right than being with you. He's more with himself. And I wrote a song to bring all that into some laughter. And I invite people to see Donald in this song. It's called Mr. Right. Hello, sweet thing, I am your perfect man. The search is over, start the wedding plan. I will take care of you, so do not fear. Just clean the house and fetch me one more beer. I am your soulmate, call me Mr. Right. I make great money and my teeth are white. I got the confidence you don't have. I'll treat you swell if you don't make me mad. The first few months I swept you off your feet. I took you out for tasty things to eat. Now that I'm president, it's time you know what is underneath my machismo. Got an inner child that needs to whine. He needs his mama's breast, but yours will do fine. I throw a tantrum when I don't get my way, and the truth be known, deep down I think I'm gay. You like my muscles, I was made to win. I work out everything right in the gym. I will protect you, you are in good hands. If you play helpless, I'll play Superman. The time goes by and something isn't right. We're watching movies every day and night. You wanna talk about your feelings again while I'm making moves on your best friend. By sweet thing, just call me Mr. Wrong, for you have wised up and have said so long. I had you fooled until you finally discovered you can't judge the prez just by reading his cover. So off I go to find the next conquest. While you get busy with a therapist, you learn some self-respect and dignity, so you don't search for daddy in guys like me. The human race, it seems, will go on mating. There ain't no future in just masturbating. You'll find your happiness without a mate, and then meet a man with no his. Hey,
That was beautiful. Scott, the only thing that can make that better is if you just had like either someone that does a really good Trump impression or someone that or just like Trump ad lib like added like
I
in the background to play.
I would love that. That's a great video idea. I wrote that
That would
song
make
so long ago, and I never thought it would ever have meaning other than relationship meaning. So now I'm seeing it in a whole new light. I love the idea of having a Trump impersonator in the background
that would just
doing.
be so funny, and they could just be like, "I do love breasts. I do love them. You're right. You're right. I do love them. I love Melania's. I love you. Love all of them.
Come close and I'll grab your pussy.
Come closer. Come closer. I'll show you my knight in shining armor." Kind of
You
thing.
do
And
a
it
very
would
good Trump. Maybe you should be in the video.
everyone has a good Trump impression. Everyone can do a
Uh-huh.
Trump impression. It's
Oh,
not that
really?
hard.
All right. I guess I haven't tried.
I think everyone has. Yeah. Um. Okay. How about this? Let's talk a slightly, not even a radical perspective, but let me get your thoughts here. Do you believe that even Trump's presidency can be seen as a catalyst for positive change?
Yes, I
Why is
think
that?
because we have total freedom. The more you look at things with a microscope, really close to the ground, the more you see and feel the pain that Trump is causing. And the more, which is totally appropriate, but you can go insane if you just stay at the microscope level. The more you look through a macroscope, you see a bigger picture. And of course, this takes faith. This is a spiritual thing, so it's not logical. But if you look at Trump as like he's a rubber band, he's pulling back society, and there's no other place to go after that but spring forward. I
You have
think
to
you would
spring
agree
forward
with
because it
me.
just happened daylight.
Exactly. I didn't realize that. Whoa, I love unconscious synchronicity puns. So Trump is like, you could see him in many ways. Of course, you could see him as poison. And yet, sometimes, I believe, no disrespect to Robert Kennedy Jr., but sometimes I think chemotherapy, which is poisoning the body, actually it sometimes saves lives. You can look at Trump as a colonic for the collective. There's been so much shit in the system, bullshit, not going anywhere. Kamala can't take it anywhere. Obama couldn't do much. I mean, one person can't do crap when there's so much shit in the system: hypocrisy, greed, manipulation. It's just clogging Congress. It's been deadlocked for so many years, gridlocked,
Clogging
whatever the
all
word
that
is.
bureaucracy.
So here comes a colonic that, through no intention of his own, like I don't think he really cares much about saving the country, but through making it worse, and so worse that, like, everybody in recovery knows, you have to hit bottom before a genuine, sincere recovery can begin. And so, yeah, I have a vision that things are getting worse before they get better, and that Trump is helping. He's like a colonic, and getting the shit out so we can see it, smell it, and eventually get our shit together. And I think it was Jesus. I'm no Bible scholar, but I think it was Jesus that said, love your enemies.
Yeah, love your enemies as you love yourself.
I said, love your enemies, just to clarify, Jay.
And I missed that one. I'm sorry.
And I
I'm
don't
pretty sure
mean
that
like, I don't like, when he said love your enemies, he didn't say like, and he was talking about the Romans, by the way, and he didn't say like. It's like, when we think about love, it's not approving of somebody's behavior. It's not wanting to have lunch with them. It's not any of that. It's an impersonal, like, hey, you're not acting in harmony with my values, and I see and feel the pain that is driving you to this madness, this crazy dehumanizing stuff. I'm angry at that, and I'm going to do whatever I can to change that. But I see you as a human being who has tremendous trauma, and that helps me sleep at night when I'm not so angry.
yeah. No, and oh, I love that scripture too. I'm a big Bible guy myself, but it comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 and 44. And he's talking to the Romans, as you said here, and he said, "You have heard it that hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. That's one of the hardest things. And I'm pretty sure in the book of Matthew here, you can use Paul as an example of this, right? Like Paul, throughout the Bible, throughout his journey, he loved everyone. Everyone that tried to kill him multiple times, persecute him, threw him in jail, locked him up, beat him, spit on him, everyone. Paul still loved everyone. Paul's a crazy powerful example in the Bible of doing justice right here, right? And this is our ultimate goal, just as humans, right? Is, yes, Scott, you and me, we disagree on a lot of things, probably. Politically, that's an off the record discussion that we can have if you want. We may disagree, and that's okay. Because guess what, Scott? I still love you. I don't think there's anything wrong with you. I think you're great still. It's not going to cause me to delete this podcast, throw it in the garbage. You're like, oh my gosh, Scott, he's just a kooky guy, plays guitar and talks about assholes and stuff like that. Like, I'm not going to do all that. The point does that serve? Like, no. Like, and the reason that we can have this discussion so openly is, as you can probably tell, I may disagree with you and you may disagree with me, and that's okay. But guess what? There's still an amount of love between us, right? There's not hate here. There's still love, right? And that's what's so important.
We're almost done with the podcast, and I'm disappointed because I feel like we got around to something that is not just you and I have in common, but it's probably the most important part of the discussion, which is what you just said. We're here to love. And if you disagree so violently with somebody that you can't feel that love, that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and you shouldn't disagree to the point that you can't love them. That's where the individual needs to do some internal checks, right? That's where you need to do some internalizing, and you need to ask yourself, okay, why do I hate this person so much just because I disagree with them? You have to turn that finger inward and be like, okay, I have something I need to work on. I have something that I need to realize about myself, that I'm angry at something, or I'm afraid of something, or I'm really sad about something, or I've been hurt here before like that, and accept and recognize that first and foremost.
Yeah. I like what you said about anger being a secondary emotion. And I always say, when I'm so angry, I always ask, okay, what am I afraid of? Because anger is my response to a sense of threat. And when I'm feeling threatened, I'm feeling scared.
Yeah. And anger can come in a lot of different forms, right? It doesn't just happen. If you notice in Inside Out, this is one thing they do really well. Anger doesn't light up until another emotion is going off already. So if fear is scared, if that's fear, then anger happens. If sadness is crying, then anger happens. If anxiety is going, then anger happens. If joy's at the forefront, anger is able to be calmed very quickly, but it doesn't come till after. So if you notice that, of course, I work in mental health. I study psychology. I have a master's in developmental psychology. So of course, I notice these small things about movies and whatnot, especially movies about emotions, but it's very interesting. Anger doesn't come until something else happens first. Anger's never alone in Inside Out. It's always with someone else. It's always with another emotion. And then it happens. So it's really interesting.
That don't get the movie metaphor, because it was a children's movie, and Jay and I have kids, but the Inside Out and the sequel were about these emotions that exist in the psyche, and they took form as little cartoon characters: anger, fear, sadness, joy. There were a few others: shame, disgust. And it was an entertaining movie that educated at the same time, helped us become emotionally more intelligent.
I think it's for absolutely everybody. I don't think it's just made for kids. It's made for everybody. And the creators behind Inside Out and the emotions, they actually used a team, and this is a cool fun fact, they used a team of psychologists, like doctorate level psychologists, to come up with, okay, what are the 4 core emotions that kids typically feel? And they did a bunch of research, a bunch of studies, pulled all their brains. It's really cool how much psychology went into Inside Out to make it incredibly accurate. So really cool. Really cool. Anyways, we have a couple minutes left. Do you want to jump into the dad zone with me here and the show?
Oh my God. Yeah. The dad
Awesome.
zone.
Let's jump into the dad zone. So the dad zone, just a few quick questions here. 4 questions in total here that I like to ask all my guests, just to kind of bring the podcast around, bring it full circle, and have some fun at the end here. First one here. Does pineapple go on pizza?
Absolutely. It helps you digest all that junk food. Pineapple has an enzyme. I can't believe I'm answering this question seriously.
I know, so serious.
I think maybe because I had a slice of pineapple pepperoni pizza last night.
Okay, okay. Um, so I disagree with you there, but that's okay. To each their own. Who are 3 people, dead or alive, that you would like to have at a dinner party with you?
Martin Luther King, Jesus, and Gandhi.
Love that. Love that. What's your guilty pleasure food or song? Like, what is it?
Wine, women, food, song, and many others. You're asking me to choose one, Jay?
Yes.
I
Like
can't
you're,
have
but
just one. They're like potato chips. Guilty pleasures. Okay, I'll take song for 200.
go ahead, go for it. I like it. Um, I love. I never thought of it that way. It's like, yeah, take them all. Like potato chips. It makes sense. Very last question here to wrap up this whole thing. What is one piece of advice that you would offer to a young dad? Let's say he's about 18 to 22 years old, who just had his first kid and he's just starting out his fatherhood journey.
I would say enjoy your child. The more you let go of trying to do it right and be perfect and read the books and the manuals and just enjoy the wonder, the amazing miracle of looking into your boy's eyes or girls and join them in their world. Their world is amazing. Look through their eyes and return to a childlike sense of wonder. Be the adult to keep them safe, but let your child return you to a second childhood that can be so much happier than whatever you endured in yours.
I love that. That's beautiful. Well, Scott, where can people connect with you and find more of your work?
I am on Facebook as Scott K. Grace, YouTube, Scott Grace, but most important would be to visit my website, www.scottsongs.com, SCOTTSONGS.com. You can find my books on Amazon. You mentioned one of them. The one that I think might be the most helpful for dads is called Mindful Masculinity, a book for men and the women who love them. And it's filled with storytelling, humor, stories about my daughter, and the parenting journey. It's not all about that, but there's part of that. It's about a new paradigm for masculinity. And when you're tired of being a warrior or a worrier, and you want to take your power back from all of the rules and regulations and hypnosis about what it means to be a man and find it within yourself, this is a good guidebook.
Love that. Like Scott said, everyone, listeners, you can head over to SCOTTSONGS.com to explore Scott's books, comedies, spiritual content, and insights on navigating today's world with humor and wisdom. So, Scott, thanks again for coming on. Thanks again for being here. It was a fun conversation. I appreciated it. We went up and down, sideways, left, right, underneath, and it was a lot of fun in between. So thanks again to our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you rate, review, and share this episode with a fellow dad or parent who needs to hear it, or just someone that you just want to share it with because you're like, hey, this person would enjoy it. Share it with them too. And until next time, stay present, stay engaged, and keep striving to be the best parent you can be.